Q105 Toledo.
There you go. We'll put you on the air. You can do my show today. Holy mother of conversations. It is Thursday, April 10th. I have just wrapped up about a 75-minute conversation that I was not prepared for, and I think I'm pretty darn well prepared. I had seen him on the news, read a bit about him, and you know that when somebody comes back here with experiences from bigger, larger, more metropolitan, cosmopolitan places, I raise an eyebrow and go, I want to know about this person. Roberto Torres, who worked in Cardi's administration, just got back here from Detroit not long ago, is a mayoral candidate. And he has some pretty harsh criticisms about what he believes we could be, what's been going on. Obviously, so that's what happens in a political campaign. And I got to tell you, this is not the jovial back and forth that I have even with political candidates or people that I disagree with. The fun parts of this, the lighter parts of this are at the end. When we get into, no surprise, a little bit of sports. Maybe we should have started with that. It's not angry, evil. It's two energetic, charismatic, feisty, pugnacious people who care a heck of a lot about Toledo and want to see it for the best. You decide if Roberto Torres is that now here on the podcast. Thanks for taking some time. It was good to meet you a couple weeks ago. Good to have you in to put your voice on tape here.
Yeah, no problem. Enjoyed meeting you at a community event, right?
Yes,
a neighborhood event. Very concerned about community issues, and that's certainly something that the campaign is doing. Is more of a people person type of public servant, and so it was an honor to have met you. And then here we are.
No honor. I don't need the political platitudes. It's totally fine. I do want to know about your background because we have some similarities, both having moved around and been in the Detroit area.
Yeah.
But a very simple question. Why did you decide to run for mayor?
So I've worked in 6 different mayoral administrations. So I've been in Canton, Ohio. I served 4 administrations here in Toledo, Cardi and Jack Ford, and most recently 6 years in Detroit with Mayor Duggan. And in each one of those communities, I've seen where leadership will impact on how a community responds, how a community either grows or falls. And in my background with economic development, I see how it's very important to the livelihood of a city to be able to have a robust economic plan.
Do you think we have that now? I know you didn't get back here that long ago, and we've had a pretty big arrow going up for quite some time. I moved here in 2013. A couple of years later, the ProMedica moved their operations downtown, and that was really the catalyst as a magnet for bringing so much downtown. And things to really have been supercharged in the last couple of years. What might you do differently? What might you shave some of the rough edges off under your leadership?
Yeah. So you talk about some of the economic impact that has been made in our downtown. In spite of the work that's been done, in the last 8 years, Toledo has lost 10,000 Toledoans. In the last 14 years, or the last 10 years, 8 years has been 10,000. Last 10 years has been 14,000. So we continue to lose population here in the city. And we have a revenue problem here in the city. The mayor has said it. Council members have said it. That the problem with Toledo is it's not growing revenue. Our response, rather than to balance the budget based on those realities, is to go into a structural budget deficit, right? To borrow monies from areas that are best suited for other type of scenarios. And one that's happening just right down the road here on Arlington, 2 cave-ins, a third one that's happening in the back alley. Those are situations that CIP dollars exist. It's the reason for why we have a road tax in order to be able to improve the infrastructure. So a lot of that plays into, you say that it's an economic growth, but it's not a growth in revenue. And so the city hasn't been growing. More people have been leaving the city. And so one of the things that I've been very effective in other communities is how do you bring back the population? How do you attract population? downtown, there's an abundance of vacancies. There's boarded up buildings, and that's reflective also of our neighborhoods. So we have that in our neighborhoods. You have a lot of blight. So as I've come back, I see that that's one area that has continued to be neglected in this community, and that's been a lot of these the vacant and abandoned buildings. A lot of our neighborhoods in East Toledo, in along North River. North Toledo, along Broadway. Many of those communities have not seen the investment that you speak of that's happening in downtown by the nonprofits. And that's the other thing is
well, hold on, not nonprofits. We're working on the Four Corners project downtown, which could be the benchmark in many ways to revitalize, to really kickstart things from the city's perspective and not private business like ProMedica. There are the facade grant programs that are offered to all the businesses downtown to get rid of those blighted storefronts. And I know we're working to build up.
If you have conversations with those businesses that are downtown, they're telling you that process is mundane, and that process prevents them from actually accessing those dollars.
The city will help them through it, though.
No. So I was there working with Cardi when we actually had facade programs, and I can tell you there's a number of businesses that received facade grants that in previous years found it very cumbersome and barriers to actually accessing those funds. So it really is an administration's role not just to have the funding, but to actually be able to get those fundings out into the neighborhoods and out into the business community. So it's not as simple as to say we have facade grants. Historically, cities have had facade grants. That's part of your, CDBG allocation. So to say there's a program that exists, that's true. That's always been consistent. However, it's the way in which those programs are managed, and it gets into the hands of those individuals that are making the investment.
What things would attract people to Toledo? It seems like, again, there are things here things like pickleball and things like that. Can you give me a comparison to a city that has lost population, that has managed to attract it back in this region?
So let's just talk about just that statement alone. So if you go to moneyinc.com, a report just came out just last month. All right, Toledo is one of 20 cities that's the worst city to come to for quality of life. So while you say that this is happening, that is happening, everywhere around us, the reports are that it's not. I'm just sharing.
Those reports, you can take them, you can leave them. There was one before that said this is a great place to retire. It's individual. I like comparing apples to apples. You can't compare any success in Detroit to what's happening here. I think our competition, quite frankly, is someplace like Fort Wayne. They're who we match up with population-wise, geography-wise, because the bottom line is people are leaving this part of the country. They're leaving the Northeast. There's population boom going on in the Southwest, in Texas, and other parts of the country. And quite frankly, I think the only time that they'll come back, regardless of how many pickleball places are here, is when it's too expensive to live there because Miami's underwater and it costs too much money to insure your homes in those places. Other than that, I think we're doing a pretty darn good job here in the Midwest to try to keep people here. It's simple population movement.
No, I disagree with you on that. So the competition is not Fort Wayne, Indiana. All right, so Toledo.
It's only comparison.
All right, so I wouldn't compare myself with Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay.
I mean that's like saying let's compare ourselves to Lorraine, and so
Lorraine's too small.
No. You're saying compare. So what I would say, Eric, is that when we look to economic growth for our city, we're always comparing ourselves to the 3 C's. We're always saying that we don't get the share. And we shouldn't. Right. So what I'm saying is we have a strategic advantage being here along the lake. We have a strategic advantage to actually have a partnership with our cities up north. So why not forge a relationship with this former city where I was at, Detroit, because of the industries, because of the port, because of the river, because of the auto industry, and why not forge a relationship with Ann Arbor and create perhaps an economic triangle? So let's try to be innovative about how we attract business and investment here in Toledo. The other thing is Toledo has not done well to actually attract international investment.
Sure.
In fact, what's happened with Toledo is a lot of times when folks want to make investment from the international level, they're often confronted with resistance from established companies or established communities here in Northwest Ohio.
So let's use Detroit as an example, because it is apples to apples in the case of, especially in these fraught times in international relations, you would want to hang on to these places, to this real estate for American businesses, for local businesses. Are there any places in Detroit? Can you give us an example of how they have accepted an international business and not made it a local issue?
Yeah, the auto industry has done it hands-on. So when you talk about some of the investment
which
so if you look at the new lab, they're adjacent to the now Ford Mobility Center. New lab, that's all international investors that are coming into new lab, and what they're doing is they're bringing industries that are related to the auto industry and to mobility to partner with Ford and the other big threes in our region.
Could you give me an example of who we could potentially attract internationally to be a part of this community?
Yeah, I'm actually having those conversations right now, because I was a part of a program that we brought to Detroit called Global EIR, which is Entrepreneurship in Residence. And what that does is it's very similar to what right now on a national level folks are trying to say, if you invest, you get this gold card. Well, there's already programs like that. EB5 does that. That's immigrant investment. That's $1 million or $500,000 to $1 million that one makes into a public project. The actual investor gets an expedited visa card. Well, the global EIR is entrepreneurship and residence. These are folks that are from other countries, entrepreneurs in other countries, who want to come and patent their idea here in the U.S. And then their commitment is that they then, when they begin to produce their products, they hire local. And so there's a number of companies that I've attracted in from Germany and from Latin America already to Detroit. And these are investors that are coming in, and they're going on their concept. They're going to grow their company in Detroit.
Do you think there'd be pushback from places like Jeep and Owens Corning, or they would be welcoming, as you pointed out, with Ford in that partnership?
Well, you look in the case of Jeep, a lot of the ownership comes in from outside of the U.S. And so the model is there. What we need to do is to bring in the startup and the middle, the tier 2 type of companies that will then support those larger industries.
Is it possible? You're talking about international tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 places, right?
Right.
Is it possible to get them? What would be your sell to them to come to Toledo?
So when I was in Detroit, I actually sat down with the ambassador of Colombia to the U.S. and we were talking then about exchange of public service types of ideas, exchange of fire departments, exchange of police department type of equipment. I have a great relationship with the consulates from Mexico, from the consulate from Venezuela. You name any consulate office that is located in either Detroit, Chicago, or New York. Those are relationships that we can bring here to Toledo.
It might be a challenging time to draw international companies and people to this country, anywhere in it at this current point in time. How can we attract residents to this area, whether it's specifically Toledo and you want to focus on that, or Northwest Ohio at large?
Okay, so I'll answer the second one, but let me just follow up on what you just said. When you say it's difficult times, you may be referencing the climate at the national level, but I will tell you that what you're hearing from D.C., from Washington, is they want more investment and they want more jobs coming into the U.S. So I don't think folks are going to stop. Folks are going to stop investment coming to the U.S.
Hope not.
As long as jobs are created here, as long as investment happens here, you're going to have that support. I think it's the opposite that is true. to what you referenced, and that is jobs leaving the area. So I just wanted to make that statement. So I think there's an appetite for that can be supported. On the side of how do you attract people, it's got to be clean and sustainable neighborhoods. You can't attract people when we have the slum and blight that exists all around us.
Hold on. Where's all around us?
All you have to do is drive down Miami Street. All you have to do is drive down.
Name me a city that doesn't have that, because it's very unfortunate. I've seen as I've gotten here,
right.
West Toledo. I'll say it like west of the mall area, places Sylvania and Douglas. I'm just more acutely aware of it now, but since I moved here in 2013, now more than ever, I see more police instances happening in that neighborhood. While we have drawn some people downtown, some people have moved out of different neighborhoods. Yeah. You can't have nice neighborhoods over the entirety of a city. Unfortunately, there's always going to be blind and bad spots.
So you define it as nice. I never said nice. What I said was we need to rid slum and blight, and what that means is we need to take care of our neighborhoods. That's a role of a city.
Okay, is there any neighborhood that doesn't have? Is there any city that doesn't have blight?
No, but they address it differently.
Okay. How do they do it?
That's the thing. So what happens is so for Youngstown, for example, Youngstown right size. They said, we're never going to be the population that we were before. So we're going to demo all these vacant and abandoned houses, and we're going to size ourselves to the reality of today. So they did that. All right. Detroit has done that as well on a more massive number.
Yeah.
They've done that, but they've also been able to take in homes for investment purposes. So rather than to turn them into rentals, is do home ownership programs and make folks be temporary renters, and then they rent to own properties. And so what we need to do is we need to clean up our neighborhoods so that way people make the investment and know that there's value in the investment. I mentioned Arlington. I've had conversations with families down Arlington, and the one thing that they say is, I met a gentleman who just bought it 2 years ago. And he goes, I bought this house because I like this neighborhood, and now I've got 2 sinkholes right in front of my yard. He goes, I can't even park here. And it's like we need to attend to those types of issues, the slum and blight and the infrastructure. And when we neglect that, then we tell other folks that it's okay to allow other things to happen in these neighborhoods.
Litter begets litter.
Yeah.
How do you fix the infrastructure of this city? Because it's an old city. Cities in the Midwest and the Northeast are old places now. They have ruins. Some of the infrastructure in the city is 150 years old. You can say that it hasn't been addressed in the past. How do we address it moving forward? Was there a better way to approach this sinkhole problem?
Well, so the sinkhole problem isn't something that just happened.
Right.
So in talking to the residents, this goes back 4 years ago.
Yeah.
That there was supposed to be some maintenance on that road. That didn't happen.
Do we know why?
So we don't know why. But the question is, why wasn't it addressed at that time? My question is, why do we take funding resources that are meant for infrastructure improvements, like the capital improvement project budget, like the road tax dollars that come in? Why do we take those funds and we use it to balance the budget, and so that we can still have a budget, but it's a structural deficit? So it's a budget that's operating with not enough revenues, but we take those resources from other areas. When we do that and take into the rainy day fund, there's issues like this that are going to need to be addressed. That's what they exist for. So what I say to that is that we need to be very open about how we utilize the resources in our budget and live within the reality. And it seems like of late, it seems like with this administration, that isn't the case. And so my question is, why isn't infrastructure, why is slum and blight, why is safety, why are those not priorities? And, you mentioned West Toledo. So, I've received several calls already from West Toledoans who have said that they have an issue with crime in their neighborhoods. And they're saying that that's not addressed. That's not being addressed because we have an administration that says that's just a perception, that's fear that's being brought on from other factors.
I haven't heard anybody say that. I haven't heard this narrative get out there outside of the neighbors that you're mentioning. It's just something that
No. I didn't mention any specific neighbors. I mentioned individuals' calls coming in.
Got it.
But I am quoting the mayor. So if you want me to send you that quote about fear is the overriding factor when it comes to crime in West Toledo, and I'm simply saying if it didn't exist, we wouldn't be having people call.
It seems like one big solution for a lot of this is to attract the best business possible in Toledo so that they can hire people so that we can have those income taxes, because we could have Opal's theme park and we could have all these people here and sales tax and blah, blah, blah. Those people will come and go. Individuals move in small numbers. But if we have a large employer here that can put several hundred people in the city, then we've got more income tax to pull from.
Let me add to that. So you mentioned a good point. And I've said this. I've said we have some international icons in our community that we all appreciate. The museum, the metro parks, the development that's happening in our downtown. But all that has been happening out of the nonprofit side. Mm-hmm. So we have development. And we have property that's being utilized, but it's nonprofit organizations that operate those. So you're right in the sense that we need to bring in for-profit industries. We need to bring in corporations that it's actually given us a tax base so that we can now have revenue to be able to do the things that we want to do as a city.
Where do we put them so that they're in Toledo?
Where do we put what industries? There's a number of vacant facilities. There's a number of vacant land. So it's not a lack of that.
No, I know. Like, brainstorm it out for me. Like, we had the Amazon facility come here not long ago. Rossford is going to get free schools thanks to their Amazon.
You go to Fulton County, you see Fulton County is just booming. But you go to North Star, so you see all these corporations out there. And one idea, Eric, is you have all these corporations that are coming in around us. And when they have visitors that come in from out of town or investors that come in from out of town, where do they take them in downtown Delta? Where do they take them? So it's like, but Toledo has those amenities. Toledo has that attraction.
They do. They have cheap land out there. Right. And I'm trying to focus this solely on Toledo.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is what prevents us from being able to attract some of that corporation to have a presence in our downtown?
Where do you
let's think outside of that. We have a number of vacant high rises. We have a number of vacant structures.
The four corners. But again, you're talking 100, maybe not even 100 people here, 20 people here, and it could certainly add up.
It makes a difference. You ask the downtown businesses,
but it's a lot
additional.
It's a lot to get those at one time, and you're talking maybe years. I'm thinking more like a large employer, like the Facebook thing, the Meta thing just happened out in Oregon, almost $1 billion, but that doesn't really help the city of Toledo. The problem. So what's a big place? Where were we talking up on Alexis in the industrial spots? Like a big plot of land in Toledo that we could use, that we could have an employer that can have nearly 1,000 employees, which again is that income tax to throw all the money at the problems that that we all want fixed.
Right. So it's not just Alexis Road. You can look at the former Dana plant and look at the AP parts. There are plenty of land right now that could be just put into reuse and actually be able to bring in an industry, a new industry. And you have relationships with developers who do that. That's the thing, is you need to have the relationships with those type of individuals that can put together a project like that.
It's not happening. We do have the Northtown facility. That's different. And I think that this is a great 30,000 macro view of things, which I deeply appreciate. I think at a very micro level, I think we're doing some of the things that we can attract those larger employees because they need bodies. And with preferably they need young working bodies between 25 and 45. And I think we're aligning the area here with a lot of things that would attract those employees. I've heard a criticism of the metro parks that you brought up. A lot of the land that we're using could be taxable of theirs, but I'm strictly talking, we're focusing solely on Toledo.
Right.
And I do think a lot of things for someone who is my age and the playground I play in, people are happy with the things that are happening in and around Toledo. I do know that I think the Ostrichtown neighborhood is going to grow into something. I'm very excited to see what comes of the old South End. And again, I just hope we don't focus too much on getting those places up and running, that West Toledo becomes unnice.
Right.
So I do think on a smaller level, we're doing things that could attract people where these employers could go, hey, 27-year-old kid wants to live here. We've got these cool places in the Four Corners. You're a couple feet from pickleball and the river.
You're talking about my experience in Detroit, right? Yep. You're talking about, I lived along the Riverwalk. I'm a runner myself. I'm a marathoner. And so I enjoy a city where you can actually be able to appreciate those type of amenities. So you're right about that. But, a counter to what you've shared about it's nice to have this is that it's nice to have anything. For the longest time, that Marina District was had press conferences upon press conferences about development coming there, and so I think folks just were taxed out about ideas and said, "Hey, here's something that's going up there, and that's great, and it's been a great addition to our downtown." But it's like we've got other opportunities for development that we ought to be attracting. I just talked to a voter from Point Place. I go when I'm in Detroit. I go to any one of the small towns that are along the river, and they've turned that little small town into an attraction, a tourist attraction, a boating attraction. We don't have that here in Toledo. They tried it with down over at the docks, but it hasn't really taken hold. And it's like Toledo has a lot of resources that could go in that direction if we actually applied it. And Point Place is just one. But let me say this. I know you talked about the macro and micro. And so there are neighborhoods where we have little to no economic presence. North Toledo used to have LaGrange, LaGrinca. That's no longer there. River East, down River East and over in Birmingham. Little to no economic activity there. Miami Street has a wonderful opportunity. And you don't have that there, absent of maybe the docks, which is further down.
Not to be totally cynical, but I think unfortunately cities always are going to have those places. Again, we can't plug all the holes. It sucks. To your point, when I first moved to Detroit 20-some years ago, it was called Taylor Tucky. And I have some friends who live in the Downriver area now. I forget where my one friend lives. But yes, you're right. A lot of those smaller towns in Downriver are not the butt of jokes that they used to be 20 years ago. And again, it took a long time. And I'm hoping I know you certainly have doubt that we can get there, but I'm hoping that I push back on East Toledo jokes at this point. I like to say, listen, we should have retired those jokes in like 2015, 2016. And I do think that the park there is going to be the catalyst for hopefully spreading into that neighborhood. So again, in 30 years, people could look back and go, this was a downtrodden neighborhood. Yeah, it was. And again, unfortunately, at that expense, we're going to lose another neighborhood. It sucks. It's just, unfortunately, the cycle of cities.
I'll say this is, Toledo would be better off if we took care of our gateways. And East Toledo is one of our gateways. People coming in from Oregon, coming from the east, are driving by. And it's just like Detroit. Folks would say things about Detroit because they would say that Detroit looks like it's a combat zone driving in, right? It's come a long ways. You still have some of those areas.
Yeah.
But that's one of the issues that's addressed with right sizing and addressed with reading slum and blight. East Toledo, South Toledo. I ran the mini marathon, so I ran that, and the runners were commenting once we passed River Road, once we got through the mushrooms or the sombreros, that monument, folks were commenting on the state of the city because of all the construction that was happening coming down Broadway. And it's like we need to take care of those gateways because they truly define.
Aren't we doing that? Now, I will say the communication might not have been the best, and we're helping the neighbors. It still
isn't. Yeah,
we're helping the neighbors after the fact. I do wish, because I expect my leaders, wherever they are in this building, running that apartment, unfortunately, you have to be clairvoyant. You have to see around corners, and some of the communication, especially for construction, has not been the best. But we're fixing it.
Well, so I'll tell you this. I don't know. So I'll just respond it this way. Lessons learned are how you measure the work that's done, right? And so I was happy to see that when the West Toledo businesses were approached about their construction, that there was actually a pre-meeting that said, here's what the schedule is going to be like. And one additional element that they made to the West Toledoans that they didn't to South Toledo was that they said, we'll actually put it in writing. Now, it's one of those where you want to make sure that as you're addressing communities, you don't change the rules just because someone's in West Toledo and other residents are in another part of town. And so while you can't say that you can address every issue in each of the neighborhoods, you definitely want to address the issue. And so to that, I only say that you're right on the communication, and they're getting it right on the 8th year and asking for another 4. So I'm just simply saying, let's just be honest, Eric. There's been 8 years of proof here, and so you have an optimistic outlook, as I do, because I see the potential of this city. We just may be looking at you may be looking at the opportunity as present, and I'm saying there's that the opportunity is not only what's present, but what's yet to come. And I can see that through a number of other avenues, whether it's economic or whether it's neighborhood development.
What are some of those visions? Those larger visions. I know we've discussed some of them.
So I mentioned to you a regional economic outlook, a regional economic approach. I think it's time that Toledo embrace the idea that we're not one of the 3 C's, and that we truly have natural partnerships with our neighbors to the north. And I would think you would agree that Toledo is.
I wouldn't in some ways, because it's competition. I think it's a fine needle to thread, because I think we both know a lot of people.
Well, I've seen. So you talk about my experience. So I've seen where Canton Akron actually benefits from Cleveland. So Cleveland had the Cleveland Plus idea. Canton Akron, Youngstown, and Cleveland. And so we benefited as Cleveland did. And so you can't argue that Canton Akron Airport is the number 1 mid-sized airport in the country.
How are all of those municipalities able to juggle that while Cleveland trying to rebuild itself, similar to Detroit? How does everybody get on the same page? How does everybody come to the table and go, we can really all help each other, even though 2 of those 3 places you mentioned, not Ann Arbor, still have serious challenges?
So how does that happen? That happens through collaboration, right? And the collaboration starts with the folks that do the planning. So you don't do economic growth, and I'm going to go to our local region. You don't do economic growth by poaching companies from one city, one municipality to another and call that a success. So in Lucas County, when we provide incentives for a company to move from Toledo to White House or Toledo to Waterville, that's not really an economic plan. It is for that business, because the business may be getting an additional 15-year tax abatement, but it doesn't help the municipalities, and it doesn't help that collaborative approach. And so that's one thing that has to change, is this competition that happens between the city and the county. I see, that we've seen that for years.
Yeah, we got to get that has to be on the same page. Exactly to your point. Yeah. You're moving from Toledo to White House. If anybody's listening to the first 20 minutes of this conversation, we're focusing on Toledo. Toledo is a loser there, and as many of us know, many of us have friends that move from Toledo to Sylvania and Maumee and places like that. How much could be solved with this 23 nonsense from Columbus up here, and how people hate that commute so much?
I hear that the discussion on 23 is a factor of what's happening up north. again, the impact of Detroit to Toledo. So we're talking about the Gordie Howe Bridge and how that's going to increase the traffic and transportation. And I do believe that that there is a benefit to being able to have that bypass that gives direct routes. Some of the cave-ins that we're talking about occur because some of these heavy freights come down these roads that were meant for just cars, and so and folks are passing certain entry points in order to get to the Anthony Wade Trail, and Arlington happens to be one of those. So that's one of the complaints that I received from the residents there.
Doesn't it also, when we get that, whether it's rail or some type of bypass, doesn't it also help people from down south? Cincinnati's a long ride, obviously, but Columbus, get those people up here to experience what we have, because I'm pretty sure I don't run into many of those people visiting our city, and I think we'd agree they like a lot of the things, but they just don't want to sit through those 25 or 30 lights.
Exactly. No, you're right about that, Eric. Whatever we can do when it comes to intermodal and getting folks to and from, that should be something that we support. We just got to keep in mind that we don't, if we don't impede on the local communities, their development, or impede upon the local neighborhoods.
Are you good on time?
Yeah, I'm good.
I want to get you on this. Not something we've discussed about, not something I've seen you talk about anywhere. And I appreciate your presence and getting out there. Your guys doing a great job. And I appreciate your enthusiasm and vision and bringing different perspective to here, because I do think it's good to rattle things up at times and at least be part of the conversation.
Are you referring to my being a Marine?
No.
and a Desert Storm veteran, by the way. No. So
if you have time, I want to get into your personal life as well. I don't know if this was going to be this tenacious. The idea, the thought to widen 475, just leaving Toledo like we're 23 is. You're familiar with that, right?
Yes, very much so.
The neighborhood is understandably very against it. I think the latest plan was there was going to be a lot less eminent domain. Obviously, that falls into we want more walkable neighborhoods, not less.
Right.
One of the things I'm thinking, since you brought it up, and I want your perspective, and I haven't made a choice in this or a decision, because again, it's still kind of a ways off.
Yeah.
I wonder, because again, foresight. I think there are probably things we can blame on past administrations, like we wish you would have done this, and we don't know why they did it. Maybe they were working on other problems. Everyone is always cleaning up everyone else's mess. My one concern is that if we have the funds available now,
you're not referring to $185 million in ARPA funding, are you?
No.
Okay. Okay. I was just wondering which resources are you talking about that we had the opportunity to make a change and make a difference, and we didn't. So I'll go ahead and let you finish up the question there.
Fingers crossed. I hope the kids programming, even though the funding is down, it works this summer. Kids are our future, as they say. There's funding available. Some would say that it's special interest driven by the vehicle companies and whatnot. Fine, whatever. You can be cynical, it can be accurate. Is it important to widen 475 now, where allegedly the funds are available because of the traffic that can potentially come to this region from the Gordie Howe Bridge? Or if we don't do it, in 30 years, are we going to go, we're on the podcast portion of the show now, oh shit, I wish we would have done it then. I'm sorry the neighbors lost their homes, but the greater good could have been at stake.
Yeah, I think there was, wasn't there a community here recently that turned down state funding for a roundabout?
Everybody here hates roundabouts.
Yeah. So the point there is that you don't always have to accept funding because it's available. You really look to see what's in the best interest of your community, what's in the best interest of the neighborhoods. So you just simply mentioned one of the areas of Toledo, and I'll use your words, that's nice, okay? And so I would say, if it's nice, why are you going to jeopardize that by being able to expand an artery that is meant to be more local? So it really, so it's
that
like
area is not. That's not meant to be local.
So you go 23. If you're coming up 75, you're cutting through 23. You're cutting to 23 because you're going to go straight up north. And so you're really not using that as a way to go to a neighborhood as much as it is directly going up north.
Well, it's not a neighborhood. It's the widening of 475.
Right. So let me get to that. So the same way, if you're going to Detroit, you're taking 75, you're going through downtown, you go 75 north. All right. So that traffic itself is not going to be impeded or is not going to be that traffic itself isn't a challenge for any increased mobility of cargo coming in through Gordie Howe, right? So the question is, do you need to have that traffic diverted through 475? And I can tell you right now, folks navigate 475 without any issues, even during traffic rush. When I hear people talk about a 5-minute delay on traffic rush, I'm like, I can't even imagine that having been in Cleveland, Grand Rapids, and Detroit.
The lodge leaving downtown at 4:30.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have traffic here.
Right. So my point here is, unless you can justify that that's what the issue is, I don't think there's a need right now to do any type of a deviation from what that current pattern is.
I don't completely disagree. I just don't want to, because again, you talked about leaders have to have an eye on now and the future. And I just hope we don't look back and go, I wish we would have done it then. Because I'm thinking the Gordie Howe Bridge is in downriver, right?
Yes.
So I am thinking you're talking 75, and I'm thinking you get off that Gordie Howe Bridge and you take 275 over to 23, and then you're coming down that way, and that's where maybe over time there's congestion, and especially if God forbid we get that bypass. And again, this is all looking to the future, because we can all look backwards, and our hindsight is 2020. So it's just something I want to throw at you. Another I think you've got my answer on that one. And the other thing I want to mention is this isn't a way to bypass, no pun intended, but to bypass the city of Toledo, right? So this ought not be one of those where we say, okay, we're going to do this, but Toledo doesn't benefit economically from the addition of this bypass. How do you feel about public transit and rail? I know there are people, many of the walkability and bikeability people would like rail in the area, but give me your thoughts on both of those.
I love it in New York. And I love it in Los Angeles. So those were communities where I think that having rail as public transport was very critical to go and from because of the traffic, because of those challenges. I think I would like to see a queue line here in Toledo, similar to what we have in downtown. So downtown, there's a queue line that actually takes you to a lot of the interest points in our downtown.
You're talking Detroit.
And this is Detroit. And so I would be more inclined to do that, so that way there's actually an intentional draw to some of our national designations, like the Toledo Museum of Art. It would be right. You do want those things to happen.
It would be neat, hopefully, once the old South End reaches its potential, which is hopefully not too far off. You have a mini queue line that could go from downtown and take you all the way along the river to Maumee.
Yeah.
I'm a big public transit person coming from the East Coast, Philadelphia.
Some of us run it. Some of us run that line, but others could take the transport.
I'm not a runner like you. I took public transit to get to school as a kid, so when I got to Detroit, I was like, hold on a second.
Right.
But then I'm like, oh, everybody here makes cars. Yeah. Do you think we can ever escape enough of that and the way the area is laid out so that more people will use public transit? Because I think TART is a pretty usable product that people just kind of overlook for a variety of reasons, none of which are all that negative.
Yeah, we just don't have the demand for that. And I think, in fact, you get a lot of pushback. You had that issue with the community in Sylvania, just to have access for TARTA coming out of Toledo downtown into the area. So I think there just isn't right now the call for that.
Is that good or bad?
That's for the voters to determine.
I wish more people got on the damn bus. I think a lot of people, when I first moved here in 2013, and I told people I was living downtown, I'm like, hey, come down tonight. And they're like, really? It was the old, well, I'm going to get shot. Like, no. I think there's a lot of that mindset with TARTA, which is something why I push. I love that they do the hens and the walleye things. And those things are packed on weekends.
They do the shuttles. When I was in New York, I had no problem taking the subway anywhere in New York, even after midnight. And so it's just a matter of folks being comfortable with that mode of transportation.
Do you want to tell people how little crime there actually is in New York?
Yeah. I didn't see any. I've been in New York maybe about 12 times, and I've yet to have shared any stories of that.
Last, I guess, question on platforms, and then some personal stuff. You have time. What is going well here
In Toledo?
What have private business, nonprofits, the administration, council? What is going well?
I think Toledoans care about Toledo. I think they do. Otherwise, you wouldn't have. You've got the Metro Parks with the levy coming up, and I don't think there's any.
I think it's going to lose.
I don't think there's any doubt that people say we have a prized Metro Park, right? So you don't have people saying, heck no, not that institution. You have that with just about every nonprofit organization that goes before. I'm surprised it's taken pre-K this long to be able to even have that conversation. It may be too late for that to happen, but I do think that that Toledoans care. Toledoans really care, and that's why Toledoans are very adamant about their neighborhoods and that we need support to take care of our neighborhoods. So I think Toledo does that well. I think Toledo does well to support its fire and police. I think those the essential workers, ProMedica, the Mercies. I think that we have a very prized healthcare industry in our city.
Yeah.
So I think Toledo doesn't have the philanthropic, the philanthropic strength of maybe a Grand Rapids and Detroit.
Agree.
And I think some of that has to do with not having corporate presence downtown, not having the major corporations downtown. I think that has to do with that. But those are areas I think that would need more improvement.
I might be misreading this, but I don't know if Owens Corning just is really getting a great deal on their land and investing as much as they could into the city for a company of their size. On a smaller level, I think we probably stalled out a little bit when ProMedica began to run out of money.
Yeah.
Had they not done what they did at that time, I mean, downtown really might have just collapsed on itself, because I don't know who else would have been the catalyst at the time.
That's exactly, when I hear folks challenge international investors, my response to that, and maybe the response of past mayors, should have been, so who's going to step up to do that? And that's just it, is folks are so quick to say, except for them, or except for this entity or that entity, but we never locally step up to do that. And we're fortunate to have ProMedica to have done that.
But now they can't.
But you're right, now they can't. So it's like we need to have those industrial, like the leadership of those industries actually come to bear, and that hasn't happened. So we need to grow that.
I am concerned that the area is on a bit of a house of cards, because we all love our Metro Parks, but the Metro Parks has really taken the ball as the catalyst for growth for downtown from ProMedica. But they're a nonprofit. They're a park system.
Exactly.
They're not private business. And if things wobble a little bit, and I think the levy coming up is going to be a fascinating litmus test for where people feel about their money as they read the news every day.
And that's why when I hear things being suggested, like putting up a police and fire levy, I think about how much more can our residents absorb when it comes to being taxed for this element, that element. At some point, we have to say we have to live within our current reality, and let's change it. Let's change that narrative. Let's change that we're having to borrow in order to be able to balance the budget. So
again, that goes back to, if we want our current residents to pay less, we need more residents.
Exactly.
So we split. Many hands make light work. Yeah. So do we ask someplace like Owens Corning for more money? It's hard to do that from Stellantis and Jeep, especially, again, right at this moment. Hopefully they can excel as they once did.
Yeah.
Some of the vehicles have not done that great over the years, but they're the big ones that can put the money into the community, and without them...
I go back to saying that we need to have a more regional approach when it comes to development. and that comes as well to our corporate partners. Just because they're not in downtown Toledo does not mean that they can't provide resources to actually make Toledo.
They should.
They should, because as Toledo goes, so does the region. And so that's the actual call to action that we ought to have out in our community. Instead of this, it's Rossford versus Toledo versus Maumee versus Perrysburg and Sylvania. I think there ought to be a call to action to bring all those resources together, because when you have an event in downtown Mud Hen Stadium, they're coming from all communities. It's not just Toledoans.
You know what somebody pointed out to me? When we think of everybody knows about stadium sponsorship these days.
Yeah.
Fifth Third isn't even housed here. They're not a local company. Where up in Detroit, you've got Comerica,
yes,
and Little Caesars. It would be great to have the OI or Dana Arena, but as I don't know when you got back, but there's been so much tumult and transition and change with the name of the golf tournament that happens every summer at Highland Meadows. Sometimes it's Dana, sometimes it's this.
Yeah.
So
that's the first thing I thought of when you said that Owens Illinois, Owens Corning doesn't invest in Toledo
as much as
events as much as they could.
My
and
friend,
the first thing I thought of is Dana had to step in when they didn't the Jamie Farr Classic, and so then Dana came in, and then we lost Dana. So it's like we need to have that continued presence. It has to be a call to action, and we need to have that from leadership.
A friend pointed out to me, he's not from here. He's from New York City, worked in Burbank, and he's a sports agent, music agent, entertainment agent over in China. And he's like, you know what? I look at and it's a great microcosm of things of this discussion.
Yeah.
He's like, I look at the outfield wall at the ballpark, and I don't see a lot of those. I see plenty of Frickers. And like Heidelberg, which is great, but they can't support the community for the goals that we're aiming to reach.
Exactly.
And again, it would be great to have these big companies here, more big companies, and maybe more asked of these companies, though I'm not sure of their finances and how they're doing and things like that. What do you do when you're not doing all this stuff?
I'm running. I work out. I come from a family of 13s, often visiting my family, and then the other 95% I'm campaigning.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do when this wraps up?
Probably take a break.
Time out. What are you going to do when this wraps up if you don't win? Because if you win, obviously you have a heavy lift to do.
Yeah. So first of all, I wouldn't get into it with the idea of not getting to there, right? So, Eric, I've been asked a number of times when I've come back to Toledo, you should run, and I have hesitated because I didn't sense the call to it, and I didn't think the situation was right because I didn't see the change that needed to happen. And most recently, with some of the what Toledo has gone through in the last 3 to 4 years, I've taken notice, and it's like I think there's a call for change. I hear it from the residents, and this is not going to be. People say like, well, you're running independent, you don't have a party behind you, you don't have labor behind you. What chance do you have? And what I say is that the chance I have is the electorate who is tired of a leadership that is beholden to the special interests, of a leadership that's beholden to perhaps a certain union and their policies, or beholden to a party leadership. And so they'd like to have someone with fresh ideas who thinks more for Toledoans than for the special interests. In Detroit, we have not a PLA, but we have a community benefits agreement, which means that any project that receives a certain amount of funding, millions of dollars, that 51% of the project is going to Detroiters and or Detroit companies. And so here in Toledo, we don't have that. When we talk about Toledo, and it's nationally known, Toledo is the least wealthiest city when it comes to somebody being African American. And yet you think about, okay, what are the opportunities that are afforded to that community when we have certain policies that prevents them from actually being a part of that that economic distribution that we have here with contracts and businesses and vendor opportunities.
Have you run into challenges essentially being an outsider, not politically, but from the area? And you obviously have roots here, but you're new back to the area, and this is the least diverse place I've ever lived, and I have found of all the places I've lived, you talked about why people love their neighborhoods. They want it taken care of. I have noticed here from places I've lived, more people grow up here and stay here and don't go 25 miles beyond their nose here than any other place I've ever lived.
Right.
Have you run into, and what you just shared, the 51% and things like that? Has that swayed people who are looking to give an outsider a chance? Because you are that.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. No. So what I'm hearing from folks is it's fresh ideas, right? And it's looking at a certain problem and then seeing that, oh, you know what, other communities are no different than what Toledo is experiencing, but they handle it in a different way. And so I'm getting a lot of support from folks that way. And the other thing is, this is going to be one of those situations where the voters, just like you just mentioned right now on a certain ballot measure, the voters at one point are going to say, enough is enough. I want something different, or enough is enough. I want things to be done based on what I had supported 3-4 years ago. And so I think that the conditions are right now for somebody from the outside. I think earlier you mentioned something about being scrappy or tenacious, and
you're tenacious.
Yes. So I'm Marine, and that's what I tell people. I said I'm Marine, and what that is that it's not going to be somebody who's going to come in and say and accept that this can't happen or you won't do it. It's not going to be easy. It won't be easy. But I've run into people who are just taken a sign. They said, how can I volunteer for you? And it grows with every day. This is going to be going door to door. This is going to be going to neighborhoods and neighborhoods. We've been together in a couple of neighborhood meetings, and I think I've been the only mayoral candidate at some of those meetings where I've gone. And so we're going to continue to do that.
The other guy has the sign. He's busy standing on the streets.
Yes, that's right. But you know what? I made him. We have an agreement.
He won't make a sign about you regardless of anything.
We support one another, and whoever is still standing beyond will hold the sign for the other individual.
Always a politician. So back to the earlier question, what do you do when you're not doing all that stuff? Running, working out, what else? What do you like to do with your wife? TV shows you like to watch?
Yeah, so I'm not married.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Though my girlfriend appreciates that, so I'm going to say to her, I said, you got another person in your favor.
Right.
So
it's only one girlfriend, right?
Just Eric, just one. Yes, and she also happens to be my co-campaign manager.
Good.
So the best thing about that is she knows what's best for me, and so I don't second guess that.
So when you guys aren't literally working, when you're not on the clock, what are you doing?
I like to enjoy Toledo venues. So we're wine aficionados. So we enjoy going out, and I enjoy Italian cuisine. So
what's your favorite place? Sorry, you're going to have to pick one.
You're not going to do that. It's in Detroit, so can I mention it?
Andiamo?
Andiamo's by the river.
Can I tell you something that hurt my heart? I am a bit of a snobbish person.
Yeah.
I like smaller, quiet, more demure places.
Yeah.
It was
Mario's is more than your liking. You should go to Mario's. That's in Midtown.
2014 or so, 2015. Right across from Registry, like in the little corner, in the Commodore Perry building, there's a country bar now.
Yeah.
So all these years ago, it opened like this, a place called Veritas.
Okay.
It was a wine.
It
was a wine and cheese bar.
Yeah.
It opened like that.
Yeah.
And a bunch of friends of mine and I had a really good time. Totally my spot. For me to go back and forth between there and Registry it filled my big city heart.
Yep.
And then just like that, it closed out of nowhere. But that's the only wine bar that I can think of. But you would have loved it. Veritas, great place.
Yeah. So I'm a member at Cooper's Hawk.
Okay.
And so I enjoy that. I mean, I was in Michigan. I was in Grand Rapids, so I enjoyed going up north to Traverse City. I enjoyed White Country. When I was in Canton, Ohio, I actually have a project there. So if you ever go to Canton, Ohio, go to Gervasi Winery. So that was one of the projects that I did in partnership with a corporate retired CEO out of Goodyear, bought a country farm it's now an Italian villa. You go there, I swear you will think you're in Italy. You have to go there. It's called Gervasi Winery. It's got a crush house. It has villas. It has the main house. I envision for the Marina District what I did there. That would have been ideal.
I do,
and you would have had your Italian cuisine.
I'm not even I don't even like it. I don't even like Italian food that much. I am excited for the Riverwalk. I keep reminding people that it's going to be more than what you think you're imagining. It's going to be more than that. I'm excited for it to wrap up. One other thing is we're getting into walleye playoff season. They have had some pretty long runs. Went to the finals like back in 2015 or 2016. I know whether you've been to the games or not, it's raucous. It's awesome. Yeah. It's wild that on a Tuesday night, we packed that place with 8,000 people. Such support. It's mini hockey town. I've never asked the mayor this or anybody else, but I throw it out on the air all the time. If they win the ECHL, like, will we give them a parade? Like, can they go up Monroe or Washington or Summit?
That would be a definite yes.
Okay,
that would be a definite yes. So you talk. So I'm an all sports guy.
Okay.
And so and I'm a Cleveland guy. So Cleveland Browns, Cleveland Cavs, the Guardians, and the Monsters. But Cleveland Monsters. Oh, yeah. Cleveland Monsters. They're not at the level of the ECHL. Yeah, it's a hockey team.
Okay.
It's a hockey team. And so, and then, over the Griffins was over in Grand Rapids. Mm-hmm. So followed the Griffins there. A farm team for the Red Wings.
Dave Watson is up there now.
Yeah. And so... So in Detroit, obviously, Red Wing fan. In fact, I remember the first time that I took. I was welcoming in Afghan refugees that had just supported our troops, our military troops, our Marines over in Afghanistan. They've come over because many of these folks were patriots to the U.S. and so they were in danger back home. So we resettled them. I resettled 350 of them in Detroit. Talk about growing a city. So 350 of them. I wanted to make sure that they understood that Detroit was a safe place, so I took them to a hockey match, and it was awesome.
A hockey match,
a hockey game. All right, okay. So hey, I was mixing it with soccer. So because that's their sport. So I took them to the Red Wings, and it was Red Wings versus Toronto. So you couldn't get two more traditional teams than that.
You get a lot of people that come over from Windsor for Toronto.
Yeah. So it was packed house. And Toronto was up. It might have been 5-0, and one of the Afghans turns to me and he says something to me, and I said to the interpreter, "What did he just say?" He goes, "Oh, he says," and he called them America because they had the U.S. flag and the Canadian flag when they did the national anthems.
Yeah.
So he goes, that American team sucks. And I'm like, no. I said, come on. I said, it's only the second period. Detroit came back. We ended up losing 7-6, but they came back and showed the resilience. And I said, that's our town. I said, that's the resilience of Detroit. But that just goes to show not only how sports can move a city, but how it can also bring in international relations.
I was super lucky, even though I wasn't a fan of the Detroit teams.
Yeah.
Baseball is always my sport, and it's what I was best at with my dad.
Yeah.
And it was, I would literally go to Tigers games before. I used to do the overnight shift. I worked in the Fisher building.
Okay.
And I'd go down to a Tigers game when America was there, and there'd be 78 people. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to go see Vlad Guerrero for $4.
Right.
So baseball was always my thing, but the Red Wings were still kind of at the peak of their powers then. The Pistons titles, and things are inching back. I know the Red Wings just fell short.
You mentioned going there for the games, and earlier we talked about just international relations. So one of the things that I did for the mayor is whenever any of these business delegations came into town, I would tour them around town. And so one of the things, if it was this time of the year, is we'd go to a Tigers. We'd go to a Tigers game.
April in the D.
Yeah, have it, and we'd be there in the city suites, and I'd have all our international delegations there. And so often using sports as a way to kind of introduce our city. So this would be no different. So heck yes to a parade.
What's your earliest sports memory that made you seemingly fall in love with sports?
Well, that's a tough one because my name is Roberto. So I remember growing up that people would say Roberto Duran. And so they would say pounds for pounds, right? Mm-hmm. Pound for pound. In fact, it was I'm trying to think of the chief that not John. Major Tharp at the time, John.
Sure.
So John coined me as pound for pound. So every time he would see me, he called me pound for pound because I told one time I was at the Boys and Girls Club there in South Toledo, and I was talking about being young and being a fighter as a kid. Always tenacious. And so he goes, well, you're pound for pound. Because I told him the story about I didn't know whether my dad named me Roberto after Roberto Duran or Robert F. Kennedy. But either one of those I said I'll take because both of them were very tenacious.
What year were you born in?
So I was born in 1962.
Too early for Clemente. Another thing, if you're into it, we have a slept-on boxing scene here. In fact, we have some fights at the Huntington Center over the weekend. It sucks that Jared Anderson, who's a big heavyweight, that his mom worked at the Zeph Center, and he was blowing up. Boxing, we haven't had a great American heavyweight in years and years. So he got talked up a bunch. He moved to Houston to start training. He'd come back here and get DUIs, and then he faced a real opponent and got his ass whooped. But this is a great little. It's not like Joe Louis or anything, but we have a nice little boxing scene here as well.
So when I started working for Cardi, one of the programs, and I was director of the youth commission, we would sponsor a number of boxing programs here in the city. And one of them was an old fire station there right off of Manhattan Avenue. And Devin Vargas ended up boxing there. He's just a kid. Devin was just a kid. And his dad came to us, and God rest his soul, he was a great, not only a great Toledo and great human, but also a great coach. And so Devin trained under him. And then when Devin had the opportunity to go to the Olympics, we did a number of fundraisers with friends of his to actually help him out. And I still have my devastating Devin shirt from those Olympic years. So yeah, Toledo has a great history of sponsoring and supporting its boxers.
Last question. What's your hottest sports take that would get you like thrown into the ocean? Can you tell me that LeBron isn't even like a top 5 player of all time? Can you tell me that Stephen A. Smith is the most calm person on TV and never gets it wrong? What's your hottest sports take?
Hottest sports take
like
would
you will go to the grave on. Pete Rose should have been in the Hall of Fame.
I would say having emulated Charlie Hustle when I was in Little League.
And hopefully you didn't cheat and lie. Hopefully you didn't cheat and lie.
No. So it would be Pete Rose because he did the head first slide, which was just a classic. It was just a classic move, and the only questionable one was when he, I think it was Tunney that he hit Oakland A's catcher that he ran into coming in home. That was the only call that I ever said.
You talking about the All-Star game with Ray Fosse? He ended his career?
The Athletics, yeah. But I would say Pete Rose should have been in the Hall of Fame. No doubt.
Could he just not have continued to lie when he had the opportunity to tell the truth? He would have been in before he died.
Yeah, I mean, of course, but if we're talking about stats, so in this case, we're talking about the leading base hitter in the history of baseball. Take the numbers, no pun intended, but going by the numbers, going by his stats, I think there's been other questionable professionals that have gone into the Hall of Fame.
Should Barry Bonds be in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
So you're cool with all the steroid guys being in?
Well, I'm cool with the fact that that there was a whole era where that was prevalent.
But baseball let it happen.
So baseball let it happen. Yeah.
I am of the mind. Barry Bonds is one of my favorite players ever. I am of the mind. My Hall of Fame is in between my ears. I've actually never been to Cooperstown, and I am a baseball historian at heart. But I don't need you to be in a building. I don't need you to have a plaque because I will always know that Barry Bonds hit 762 home runs, and most of them from like 400 on were aided at what was going on in the game. Yeah. I don't even like hearing the argument, well, he was a Hall of Fame player before that. It's the entirety of the career.
It is.
So I am very good at compartmentalizing. This is a great, tenacious, pugnacious discussion. Any final thoughts? You want to ask me anything? You want to throw anything at me?
No, so just a word out to the audience out there, and that's just to say, you've had 8 years to see what Toledo has brought forth as far as progress, as far as support, as far as a vision. And I say, if in 8 years you're still trying to define who you are or what it's going to be, or continuing to change the bar on what is a successful Toledo or what does an emerging Toledo look like, then I ask you to reconsider that and to say perhaps there's another way of looking at leadership in our city. And perhaps you ought to look at leadership that's been outside the city. You mentioned it. Until you leave the city of Toledo and go out to other communities and to see how they are run, to see how they create, to see how they vision, to see the relationships that they build, until you see that and then come back and to say, we can be better. We can do this. We can be better. It's not just a slogan. And we do a lot with slogans here in the city. But let's show the results. And so I just ask the people just to consider that. And just know that, my platform is Toledo first. Right? Simple as that. Toledo for Toledoans. Let's make sure that Toledo businesses get supported. Let's make sure that Toledo residents get opportunities for economic, prosperity. And let's make sure that whatever we do, it's always in the interest of our city.